I do recommend Meetup to a lot of my friends that are looking for different things. Wine tasting, movies, book club, meet a lot of new people, a lot of new friends, and it will make you more social.
Welcome to the fourth game of HANS NEPO match in Belgrade, Hyatt Residency. What's up, guys? Doing well? Connection good? Yep, new playing hole. The current score is 2 for Jan, 1 for Niemann. This afternoon we're gonna have the game 4, and tomorrow we are already in the second part of the match in Belgrade. Earlier today it was a very quick game where NEPO sacrificed the queen and Hans managed to hold that endgame. But NEPO didn't want to risk and offered a draw to Hans Niemann, which he obviously accepted because the Niemann was the one that are on defending side of that position. And now we have the fourth game. This is the position actually from the first one. There's some mistake in the rounds. 1 second. Fourth game not yet started. It will be in a few minutes. Join ENDGAME AI to watch it live from their website. There is no different time controls. It's always the same. 60 minutes plus 30 seconds without time control after the 48th move in the game. So experimental, trying to invent something new in chess. The location is in Belgrade, Serbia, Hyatt Residency. For those who are first time watching the stream, I'm Eleyah, Vidmaster from Serbia. I'm commenting and covering this stream, so thanks for being here and thanks for making this event. Your mic is quite bad, pickups away too much, please reduce the gain if you have it on it. Okay, let's try. How about now? Is it maybe here? Is it good? Maybe now it's better, no? Camera quality is bad. Only for today. We had some problems with that, and round 4 is there. ENDGAME AI, please make the board so we can follow it. Otherwise we have to use the other source of board. They started the game. Okay, it's here. We have the board. Hans open with e4, and we might see Rosalimo again. Was this the same variation? In the second game we got the same line. And let me make also the live board there for you. Okay, great. And we also got the even bar. Very nice. E6, the same line. In second game we got the same variation. Will Hans pick something different now? Castling is one of the best lines. But he decided again. Are we repeating the same line? Will Hans opt for the same line that he did? D3 and then after queen c7, e5. Maybe he made improvement there. He analyzed carefully queen c7, but now he chooses actually to go for knight to c3. In the previous game, after the NEPO played queen to c7, Hans opted for e5, and after f6, we got this on the board. Bishop e5, so queen c7, e5, f6, bishop to f4, and this was what happened in that game. Knight to e7 was played, Hans castled, and so on. But now in this game, he chooses to go for knight to c3, and we are seeing first time Nepo thinking, because most probably he was not expecting due to the e5 the best variation. But Hans chooses to go for sideline, I would say. I don't know which one is more popular. Maybe we can check the database here. After queen c7. Oh, they want me to sign up, but I'm not signed here, so I'll skip that part for now. But because I cannot look database by not being signed up, maybe I can sign up in another window. 1 second. So knight c3 on the board, and Nepo thinks how to respond. d6 is the common move here. The point is later to go e5, try to stabilize the center. And the whole story of queen c7 is also prophylaxis, trying to see how white's gonna take his development and trying to push e5. Maybe also e5 here is possible. Knight c3, e5 is also a common move here, trying to fix the center. I would say that Hans wants to go here quickly with castles, and after d6 to go knight h4 as typical idea in these lines. I would say that this is definitely one of the sharpest openings on elite level currently now. There is a limbo variation, but becomes very popular that black allows, because there is significant amount of lines where black looks for dynamics and fight. In the past, Rosalimo was very big thing for white. Back 10 years ago, it was very, very good opening for white pieces, and everyone was avoiding to play knight c6, the second move, despite even Sveshnikov as one of the most solid Sicilians are coming from that one after d4 takes, knight takes, knight f6, knight c3, and then e5. Then players decided to avoid all of these open Sicilians and chooses to go for Rosalimo. And now we end up in this variation here. Undo it. Not this. Just for 1 second. So we can get the database. Okay. All right, so in this position earlier, castling is the most popular move here. Queen e2 is the second one, and knight c3 is actually on the 5th place of popularity. 31.6% win rate for white, 42.1% for black, but it's based only on 19 games. I believe this is the database for Masters. It's not the online database. And as the most popular move that Hans played in the second game, now he chooses to go for sideline and plays the move knight to c3. And actually Nepo is trying to figure out what's the idea for specifically for this move. It's just natural move, but Hans is definitely prepared here and trying to cook something against Nepo. So let's see what he has on mind and what type of line he might choose, but he's definitely ready if Nepo goes for e5 to quickly go for knight h4 and quick castles f4, trying to press directly along the f line and uses better and faster development in this game. On the other side, oh, actually Nepo played a move e5, so we might get this thing that we plan on the board. Also, on the live board is showing some move 92. Let's try to fix that also. Live board shows some stuff. Maybe we can turn that off if that's possible. And Hans comfortably goes to castles. I think personally that this game will be very, very interesting, and that Hans will get a lot of chances in this game for sure. Amount of confidence that you can get from the opening segment, especially if you're better prepared than your opponent, is very important nowadays, and especially in the high level chess. So, great. Alright guys, what is your opinion? Who I'm gonna take down this match? Who is going to be the leader in this match after 10 moves from this point? Interesting to see NEPO has gone with a hoodie this afternoon. Perhaps the air condition is too high in the hotel. Actually, it's quite nice here, weather in Serbia, generally outside and inside a hotel, so maybe he's just more comfortable with a hoodie. Change board color settings, please. Let's see how we can do that. Board settings. Profile. Yeah, we can put some normal, I would say, green color and some pieces like this. And that's it. I think that will be better. Yep. I think this is better. And for the live board you have this one, so no worries. So we can make the difference between live board and analysis board. Yeah, for those who just joined us, we have the scoreboard here. NEPO lead in the first game. And after that, we have 2 draws in a row. Very shaky draw in the second game, where NEPO got a lot of advantage, practical advantage, and Hans defended successfully, which is very nice. And in the third game, NEPO also pressed a little bit, while Hans on the other side very confidently defended and led that game to the drawish endgame. Despite NEPO sacrificing the queen, it was very hard, even for him to put a pressure, having more pieces on the board in amount of material against the queen is definitely an advantage if there would be more pieces on the both sides, but since it was endgame, the queen was dominate and NEPO couldn't do anything. They agreed on a draw, and result is currently 2-1 for NEPO. And Hans played the move b3. Typically, as we know in these positions, this is common move. The point is always to hold the bishop on b2 square and then press on e5. On the other side, the knight on c3 could be virtually placed at some points. Why? Because it's restricted because of the c6 pawn. So technically, knight would be better placed on c4 here, so we can create some tension together with this knight and this bishop. But the reason why Hans put a knight there is most probably to get with some sideline idea and confuse NEPO for the rest of the game. And I believe that after bishop to b2, maybe his plan is to move the knight on a4, but after d6, then knight simply doesn't belong there. Maybe he wants to bring the knight on e2 and then on g3, or he just wants to move the knight, go f4, and then knight might replace the pawn on that square in the future. So yeah, we're gonna have a very intense game. Can I explain the NEPO move? NEPO pretty much wants development, and he is looking forward to go for d6, maybe even f5 quickly, then knight f6, because these type of positions are known that black has to generate some counterplay as soon as possible before whites take the action and controls the f5 square. Otherwise, Hans will have a very interesting game after pushing the f4 pawn at some point. Was this Rosalimo? Yeah. Yeah, I think board is fine now, guys, no? Yeah. d6. He wants to get the bishop out. Also, this pawn protects the center. Despite having the double pawn, this pawn here is actually beautiful because it controls the d5 square where this knight can land. That's why I mentioned earlier that this knight belongs better in d2, so he can actually put a pressure on the certain potentially weak pawns, while this here is controlling and outshining the knight currently. And Hans goes directly for knight e2. Hans might be already still in a prep. He wants to get this guy here, and he wants to get maybe knight on d2 actually, to c4 and then to push f4. That's maybe the Hans idea. So if you get something like, let's say, knight to f6, bishop to b2, let's say short side castles, I would say, then maybe something like knight e2 and then f4 could come followed by knight c4. That's actually maybe what Hans wants to do. On the other side, NEPO has this beautiful move knight to h5, which makes much harder for Hans to play this type of move f4, because certainly he wants to trade, he wants to open up the position, because bishops are bishop. And we can notice that again NEPO is getting the bishop here, because in the same opening segment as we had in the second game, Hans were suffering with two knights, defending very open white position against two pair bishops of NEPO. And here we might get the same story. But his bishop is different. He gets some activity. So that's why he might be looking for quickly castling and then trying to control this specific square here. And knight e2 was in the game. This is the live position. Let's see what happens. Maybe we can include some a5, a4. But to be honest with you, I think that personally, inclusion of a4, a5, it goes in the favor of white, because in the future, this guy here might be on target. So it doesn't mean necessarily that black will make something while pushing this pawn. On the other side, can NEPO go directly for something like f5 here? This is a good question after knight e2, f5. Getting some already imbalanced game, Hans has to take obviously, despite developing his bishop and now planting the knight on g3. And many people would think here that after the dropping bishop somewhere, let's say on g6, black is getting open game here, two bishops, very nice center. But I want to tell you something, that this pawn can never push, simply because leaves this pawn here unprotected. More you extend these pawns, which I can see on lower levels so many times. d5, d4, will just create significant weaknesses, and this pawn will be very, very on target. Also, you're creating the c4. Like, you can maybe play d5 in some positions if you want to get some tactical blow in the center, but you have to be very careful how you push this pawn. So NEPO will be conscious about that 100%. And do we just get this on the board? We get this position, right? Yeah, this is on the live board. We get this on the live board, guys. So e takes, bishop takes. We have this, and now Hans should play knight to g3, which he actually played. Knight to g3. So there is a little more comfort for Niemann due to the better pawn structure and not stable center of NEPO. Stable for now, but we mentioned that pushing the pawns, he has to be careful how he's doing that. On the other side, there is idea for Hans to go with typical Rosalima plan of a3 b4 plan, breaking through the structure. Despite giving an option for black to solve the problem of these double pawns, he will open up some lines, A line or B line, and that will be useful for the rook on A1. For those who just joined us, the third game went in a draw, where NEPO had a slightly preferable endgame, but Hans held it very strongly, without any doubts, and NEPO just decided to offer draw, take a rest for the second game, and then try to make some dynamic play with the black pieces. As you see already in the game, quite a lot of imbalances. Bishop pair again for NEPO. Hans having nice time currently with his knights and controlling these light squares. Eventually, if he can get this light squares for himself in the future, that will be beautiful. Queen d7, for example, might appear as an option. Also, knight takes f5 is possible here, but can we just continue developing here and like playing rook to e1 maybe, and then going queen to e2, trying to control the center better, or just going something like queen to e2 directly? It makes also a lot of sense. Let's say knight to f6 by NEPO here, and then at this point maybe we can just develop. I'm not sure if bishop now belongs on b2 anymore, because you don't need to put your bishop here yet, since the pawn is on d6, and you don't want to make your bishop limited. So I believe that bishop is actually fine on d2 square, which keeps the control on this diagonal, also keeps the control on this diagonal. Rook from a to e1 will come, and then we're going to put significant pressure on the e line. Of course, non-sacrifices exist here yet, because NEPO will just castle at this position. Most probably we might have this trade, and then something like knight g5, knight e4 to coordinate this knight better at that position. Trading the knights could be possible, and then start putting the pressure on the d line if they make it happen. So after knight g3, NEPO thinks, because he has a lot of options, he can play queen d7, he can play bishop g6. Bring the bishop all the way back is a little bit passive, but it's also possible. Bishop to e6 is apparently not the best idea, because you're simply putting the bishop on the e line, where it gets directly into the potential sacrifices once you have unprotected piece. Like, you already start thinking how you can punish your opponent for that. Specifically, the d4 breaks could appear after you have the rook on e1 or queen on e2, let's say. d4 breaks are already possible later. So this position is getting definitely not in a favor for Jan if this happens, but I think that he'll just place the bishop on some normal square like g6. e6 is also normal, but it's on the line of the very big X right here. Also queen d7 or bishop g6 might come, and the position will be very dynamic. Let's read some comments now, until we wait the Jan decision to switch back with a bishop. Okay, you don't like the color of the board? Or you don't see the arrows because they're also green because of the color of the board, right? This position will be a sharp position or slow position. No, this is very slow position. If any side goes very straight away with some ideas, with some direct moves, direct threats, direct trading process, this will be most probably painful for that side because white has to improve the position. White has to develop. White has to use this strategical domination on e4, c4 square to bring the rook to the game, to look after where this bishop can come and so on. That's actually how they should, how the Neiman has to react here. He can't go with concrete ideas here. That will just show another impatient side of him in this game. So that's what I think. Okay, I think I changed the pieces. Now it's, oh, this is too darky. This is too dark board, right? Is this better board or no? Or I should look for another one? Is this better? Now we have now you can see the red, the green circles and arrows. So I think this might be better. It was better before. Okay, let's try to find some brighter board. Maybe this one. I think this one is better. Oh yeah, this is definitely a better one. This is 100% better one. You can just see clearly everything, and also you see the green circle. Yeah, this one is even better, right? This is the best. Hit 1 in the chat if you agree. Hit 1, hit 1. Let's change board style every 10 minutes. It is fun. Okay, yeah. And how about the live board? Live board is good also, right? You're not watching live board too much. So he dropped the bishop back to g6. Bishop to g6 is the move we recommended earlier. And Hans is not waiting at all. He's definitely deciding in this game to speed up a little bit on this clock because he understood from the first two games. In the third game, he didn't have the time scramble problem, but in the first two games, he definitely had. And the importance of playing fast in the opening, if you know the opening segment very well, is to play as much fast as you can. So that's technically what he did in this game. 12 moves in the game, not below 1 hour, NEPO 46 minutes. Definitely Hans is the one that starts pressing here out of the opening and getting slight more comfortable position. But okay, there is nothing concrete, guys. Don't get excited too much. The things can get changed very quick. And NEPO goes for knight at 6. Let me check the database and see if there's any game here. No. In the Masters database, no. Maybe online games there is, but technically speaking, no moves, no database moves. In this position, there is only one game played by Girianish and Darda Daniel 2 years ago in Olympiad in Budapest. And I think Giri was with the black pieces, yeah, I think, yeah. And he played knight f6. Then knight g3 happened in that game, then castles and so on. But in this game, we have something different. F5 move, takes, knight g3, bishop g6, queen e2, and Nepo decided to go for knight h6. Will we get another game where Hans will fight with 2 knights against 2 bishops of Nepo? But in this case, it's much different scenario. If you remember properly the second game, you would notice that bishops were much more open and had very strong diagonals in that game. Now, in today's game, it's completely different. Knight could be more powerful due to the bad bishop on e7. So knight h6 is potentially strategically bad move because Hans can actually go after this knight, and after pawn captures, Nepo will suffer because of 2 double pawn structure. I'm not saying that Nepo is lost here or something. Position is still far away from being better for Hans Niemann, but this is actually slowly and eventually getting interesting if Niemann starts putting the pressure on some of these double pawns, such as queen to e3. And if they don't defend this pawn, that's it, game over in terms of pawn material. Pawn is very important here, especially the h6 pawn, because he controls the g5 at least. He has to play something like h5, I would say. Castling longside would be also possible, but okay, he didn't want to take. After knight to h6, he actually played a move knight to g5. Unfortunately, he did not take that knight. Maybe he remembered, maybe he got nostalgia from the second game where he really suffered, and on the end he actually defended, but he really suffered in that game, like spent a lot of time being in a time scramble also, and he didn't want to commit the trade of bishop takes h6. Beautiful chance to try that out because it's definitely different position. Bishops are not powerful here that much, but on the other side, you know, bishops are bishops. Bishop pair is bishop pair. So who knows what's gonna happen if we got that. Maybe he has chances in the future, but now suddenly when the knight g5 is on the board, technically speaking, knight can come on f5 in the future. Currently now we have a threat of knight e6, where queen will suffer and pawn on g7 will suffer. So that's how Hans Niemann is threatening, but I think queen d7 is very easy move that eventually Jan will find, and maybe the idea of Hans was actually f4. So he wants to maintain the piece material and try to open up directly to destroy the king in the center. Because now if the castle's short side and we can take on e5, let's say we're gonna make some trades here, queen takes or maybe knight takes, maybe queen takes is just enough. And if they would take back here, this will be very bad pawn structure for Nepo. Technically speaking, Hans is the one that prefers now the endgame here, to trade off queens and keep these good knights on the board, because in this position, bishop pair is useless, especially the bishop on e7, because he's completely restricted by the pawn on c5, and he doesn't have this open diagonal, so he would like to get the knight on e5 here. On the other side, after f takes e5, rook takes f1 and queen takes here, maybe he'll try to bring the other rook with tempo first, but I believe that Hans will just move the queen some or queen e2, or maybe just something like knight to f3, where he definitely has an amazing game. So yeah, on the board we have knight g5, and now Nepo is thinking how to respond to that one, but I believe that he'll just simply play queen to d7, and then Hans will go for this strike with f4. What happens after e takes f4? Is that really bad for them? Maybe yes, because knight e6, and then we have knight g7. And the problem with the knight e6 is that king cannot castle. If king can castle, then he's completely fine. And we can also notice in the second game how Nepo went with this crazy idea of king f7, rook f8, and then king to g8. Because, or the rook was already on f8 and he just played king f7, king g8, which Hans completely missed. This king maneuver was interesting. Now here this is not possible, because if you play the move king f7, you just lose the game by rook takes f4. So I believe he might try bishop f6 here. And I'm already seeing that many people will go crazy with the exchange sacrifice and start doing some stuff for the king, because you can notice this, you can notice this is open, everything is open, and definitely they're in a significant trouble. NEPO spending a lot of time. Knight g5. Burning a lot of time here. For some reason, clock is frozen, so please, developers from ENDGAME AI, work on that. We want to see the exact time of NEPO's clock. How do you feel today, by the way, guys? I didn't ask you that question. Many people ask the question, what is the reason of the quality of the video so low? It's because it's not on the cable, it's on the link online, so we're just transferring the footage from the link, which is eventually not the best because of the connection overall. And we got knight on f5. Knight on f5 played in the game. Let's take a look. So we see knight g5. Oh, many things happen very quickly. Knight f5. Wait. Wait. Knight f5? Wait. Did just... Oh my god. Hans missed 96. Plus 2.3. What's happening? He went so quickly with queen h5. Takes and queen h5. As you see on the live board. So wait. What happens? Knight g5, queen d7. f4, bishop. No, this is not a... Oh, this is the real game. Okay. My bad, guys. My bad. Okay, it's a little bit confusing here. What's the live board sequence? Okay, yeah, this happened. I thought that in this position here, after knight g5, NEPO went knight f5, and that he missed knight e6, and that after this trade he's simply like losing the piece here. Okay, he's not losing the piece, but he's definitely losing the control of the game. But actually happened this, and then f4, so queen d7. They made trades, knight f5, takes. And then queen h5 happened. Bishop g6 is played, so... Okay, now this is completely different. The problem now for Niemann is that he would actually love to have the knight here instead of this bishop. This bishop is absolutely closed. Absolutely close. I don't like the decision. What really happens in this game? Why he had to go for this? Can he do something else here? Okay, maybe actually this was the only way. We missed that NEPO can actually take on g5. This was the reasonable take. Knight f5. We just made all of this trade. But here, does he really need to go for this? Can he play something else? But maybe, yeah, because if knight e4, then this knight will be packed here on d4 square, so technically, yeah. So now we are here in this position. I believe that Niemann will bring the queen somewhere where it could be very useful. If he goes on f3, he's definitely not allowing castling, and castling longside could be also tricky because, as we mentioned earlier, there is very certain a nice break. Like, we're just gonna point out that definitely Niemann can think about a3 and b4 followed by bishop b3 and then just simply putting all his pieces on the queen side, while the king side is pretty much safe. But the king has to go somewhere, right? He can never castle, that's the problem. By the way, if the king is on g8, then black is more comfortable in this position. 100%. But king is in the center, and that's the biggest problem. That's actually why maybe Niemann went for this position. Queen f3, bishop f7, trying to block this, of course. And then short-side castles. I think he might be just in time for that. Can we get some counterplay? Quick counterplay, but eventually they'll manage to castle. Bishop to e3, short-side castles. Queen to g3 or queen to... But queen to e4 will run in the future for this, but maybe he wants queen c4. But okay, just king h8. Maybe queen to g3, bishop to g6, some improvement, like h3 maybe, just for the future for the king, but I don't believe that Hans can do something in this position. This looks very dryish. And both of them cannot do anything. So yeah, I think that this position is not so much grindable. That's my opinion. I don't see the way how white can directly press or something. Maybe he can do some slow ideas. As we mentioned earlier, like idea of a3, b4 as a typical one could arise, trying to break through and open up this rook on a1. But on the other side, I don't see the big problems for Nepo here. Eventually, he needs some time to castle. Once he managed that, I think he's definitely in a zone of surviving everything. For those who just joined, the scoreboard is for Nepo. He's leading 2-1 Hans Niemann. Last 2 games were draw, and the first game Nepo won convincingly in that Ray Lopez game. Famous Ray Lopez endgame. We can also see them in playing hole. Crispy footage, but we can actually see them. So that's, on the other hand, it's quite good. What is your rating, guys? Can you type in the chat so we know who are our listeners? What is your rating? And do you have Endgame AI account? That's even better question. Maybe here Hans expected that Nepo would play the move g6, but I'm not sure why he would think that. Bishop g6 is definitely more logical. This is just creating the dark square weaknesses that can be exploited by queen h6 or something like queen h4 and then just go for h3 g4 and then f6 is always a good entrance for the rook in the future. So I'm not really sure if he go for it. Of course not, this is just mouse slip. But yeah, bishop g6 is on the board and he suddenly starts spending some time here. 59 minutes for Niemann and 42 for Nepo. Nepo is quite confident again. He survived the opening segment. And now we just have normal position on the board. $27.60, 20,600, that's nice. 6,000, that's nice. $2,045 on endgame, yeah, that's very nice. 250, yep, hope you're gonna get better soon. What is main difference between FIDE Masters and International Masters like you and Grandmasters like NEPO and HANS? The main difference between FIDE Master and International Master, it's not a big one actually. I think International Masters are, let's say, more solid players. Obviously everyone is taking risks, but nowadays if you want to win the game you need to make some playable positions, some dynamic game. And that's why I think to get to the International Master level you need to be very good in calculation. So I believe that all segments are included, not necessarily like, let's say, the endgames. I believe that endgames are basically area for all chess players that are weakest spot. Like for all chess players, even grandmasters. Obviously there is exceptions, but endgames are definitely the most terrible segment of every chess player area. I had a situation that I was playing some, let's say, 1800 or 1900 player, that he comes on the board and blitz out, smash the table with some 15 move line variation and Sicilian or something else. And then after in the end game he just made the most beginner 1000 level mistake in endgame for the rook endgame or anything else, and that's usually how these games are ending. Nowadays everyone is familiar with the opening segment, everyone knows the line, everyone knows the tricks. And I believe that's why Hans built up this project about endgame AI. He wants to increase the knowledge of people about the endgames. So sign up, made the account if you still didn't. And of course the difference between International Masters and Grandmasters are also huge. I think it's even more than FIDE Masters and International Masters. I think it's a matter of experience also. More you play, if you eventually just play and just get experience, I believe that like 10 years of playing will give you a very good level of chess. Of course, in meanwhile you will learn a lot about your game, what you need to work on. But by just playing you will learn many stuff. Too much smashing at the table. 1 second. Can Levi Rosen become a GM? I believe he can. He definitely shows the very strong play, online play. He has very good intuition. He is definitely one of the best players in online chess. He crossed 3000. Like, who can cross the 3000? There is maybe 100 people that managed to do that. Okay, I don't know if I made misinformation now with this, but there's actually very few people that cross. For example, 3200 and 3000 is also very hard to cross. So my chess.com rating, for example, is 2800. 28 pick, 27 consistency. So 3000 is huge, and I believe that with a consistent work and discipline, he might become. If you only focus on content, that's so distraction. So, and you know, nowadays is important how much you want something. I believe that you can become anyone if you put in the work and you really become that thing, you know? Like you literally need to breathe that thing if you want to become something. So okay, we got the thing that we mentioned. Bishop g6, queen h4, that's on the board, right? Bishop f7, a3, castles, and b4. So pretty much the plans that we proposed for Niemann and for NEPO are coming on the board. As a typical break on the queen side, it's something that Niemann has to do, otherwise his bishop is pretty much closed on c1. He needs to find some diagonal, despite helping the NEPO get rid of these double pawns. A line is getting open for the Niemann, which is good, and this could show very good and consistent counterplan. Like for example, bishop to e3 now has a lot of sense here, and the counterplan on this side of the board can get big. And the reason why NEPO is in most of scenarios very safe in this position is because we have opposite color potential endgame bishops. And that's only for the endgame, of course. But for the middle game, while we have the queens and rooks, it doesn't matter yet. So it's just pure control who's gonna restrict more of the pieces. And like c4 looks like a bit restrictions for this bishop, but then suddenly once this bishop comes here, he'll take down this pawn on d3, which is a little bit annoying thing that we don't want to allow black in this position. On the other side, you may notice that this g5 pawn looks terrible here, right? Because we have double pawns. He's also closing the area of the queen and so on. But in the future, this pawn will become quite useful thing. Why? It's a very simple answer. You know that you need prophylaxis for a king. Like we mentioned in some line that king has to play the move h3 to have king h2 in the future and so on. The same thing NEPO has to include for his endgame. But once he does that, sorry, let's say g6, he'll create the weaknesses on the dark squares. If he plays h6, then this pawn will just take, and it will open up the king. So NEPO is suffering from prophylactical play on the king side. That means that Hans is currently breaking through the queen side and trying to reach NEPO's king like this. Like in the Clash Royale, right? Like you're attacking from the flank and then you're getting to the central main tower, right? I guess there is many fans of Clash Royale here. So this is pretty much the strategy of Hans Niemann in this scenario. On the other side, NEPO's strategy is to strike directly from the center. So he wants to get bishop on g6, trying to push d5, trying to push e4, bring this rook here, and then just strikes in the middle. That's what he wants. But Hans will not allow him that, because bishop e3, rook takes a7 will happen, and so on. Hans also talked about Clash Royale in comparison in chess. Yeah, literally, I think there is one viral video that I watched recently when one guy, I don't know, I don't understand because I don't play the game, but I know it very well because I see people around it play it. And this guy, I think he is like one of the best players in the world in that game, and he, I guess, used the timing when he played it, no? Some move, like he put something and then people went like wow in the chat, because timing is very important in chess also, and is any game we have 1 versus 1. Someone asked to explain the purpose of the b3 at the beginning of this opening. Let's go and rewind for those who just joined the stream. So we got the Rosarimo game like we get in the first part of the match. In the second game, knight to c3, e5, castles, bishop e7, b3. So the point of b3 is, why do you want to get the stability on the light squares? Because eventually the light square bishop will try to dominate this square and this square in the future, and it's also potentially a very good spot for the bishop. On the other side, it just slows down these ideas from the rook on b8 to make the counterplay and waste some time for Hans. And it's a very useful move overall. It's also increasing the strength over the c4 square. It's very well known in this opening that b3 is the move b3. If you make any time, you will not make mistake. And then maybe you notice now after a few moves, then why then Hans went for a3 and b4. It's because he cannot produce anymore the counterplay on this side of the board, and he needs to generate some counterplay on the other side, which is also a very well-known idea. If you can break through the king side in the Rosarimo or the center, then you try from the queen side with this idea of a3 and b4. This is pretty much the point of b3 at the beginning. And okay, let's see what happens. He decided to go knight to e2. We also mentioned in that game that knight bd1 to d2 and then to c. Sorry guys. So knight b1, d2 and c4 is pretty much the idea for white to get and put some pressure, but he chooses knight c3, where NEPO actually spent a lot of time trying to actually see what Hans wants to do in this position. And then he won knight e2 after f5, where NEPO most probably surprised a little bit Hans, but it's not a big surprise. Maybe Hans just didn't expect this move and maybe didn't check it in preparation, but it's quite straightforward now after this that this knight comes to g3 and NEPO uses the momentum of, like, this is the last chance for him to play the move f5. Otherwise, if this knight comes on g3, it's very hard to play that move. Like, you don't really want to play g6 and f5. This will waste so much time and also expose the king side. So this is pretty much the only chance. It's quite also well known from the structures like Sveshnikov and Kalashnikov Sicilians. E takes, bishop takes, knight g3, bishop g6, queen to e2, and in this position NEPO played the move knight h6, which is quite important moment of the game, where we're gonna ask definitely Hans. I want Hans win this game. I want Hans in the lobby, in the studio, to analyze the game together with me here. Hopefully he'll have the time, and I want to ask him about why he didn't take the knight on h6. Maybe I think it's more like a psychological purpose, because in the second game he played also against the bishop pair and it didn't went well. And maybe that was like nostalgia thing. He didn't want to enter the same position. That's why he chooses to play queen to e2. Sorry, after knight h6 he chooses to go knight g5. And then eventually now black has to defend on e6 by playing queen d7. f4 by Hans, forcing line with bishop g5. Pawn takes, knight f5. Simplifying more and then getting queen h5 check. Forcing the bishop back and placing the queen on h4. Bishop f7, the point of that move is to get the castles, so he can block the line. a3, castles, b4, c takes b4, a takes b4. We mentioned already this, the counterplay on the queen side, quite important. And bishop to e3. That's where we at now. And we got bishop e3 on the board. Nepo coming back. When you're 2730, 2750 range, it's hard to play tournaments because in opens, you lose a lot of rating and win a little money. And you don't get invited to big tournaments. That's true. That's why Nepo and Neiman are making this match, challenging each other's. And I agree that when top player joins the open tournament, it's quite big risk for him if he's not well prepared, if he's not ready to fight young prodigies that are purely unrated. Even some 25, 24 people could beat 26, 2700. It's not any more surprising, especially nowadays with all this accessibility of the engines, cloud engines, and generally that helps the opening preparation. For those who just joined to the stream, the scoreboard is in leading for Nepo. First game he won, then second and third game it was 2 draws, and now the fourth game will mark the 50% of the tournament. We see them playing the playing hole quite nice spot. Unfortunately the camera is ruining it. Bad quality, sorry about that guys, tomorrow we'll fix it. I said it even yesterday, sorry about that. But this is what we need. The analysis board and them explaining their moves. A5 played. The reason why Nepo did that move is just immediately to stop Hans of producing the counterplay on the A line. So if he waited for a second and played some other move, like let's say rook from f to e8, then Hans will just go rook a4, and now a5 is already potentially late because rook from f to a1 will come here and then directly press here and not allow Nepo actually to take on b4. With a move a5, rook a4 is too late because he'll just take on b4, and then after queen takes b4, rook takes b4, Nepo might be the one that takes now the counterplay and bring his pieces on the queen side. So that's why a5 happened. I believe pawn takes, rook takes, and maybe take, let's say take, and improving the queen a little, rook to b1. But generally speaking, we mentioned in the previous game that always you want to control the closer line to the king. So f line is quite important. If you play something like rook b1, you're very much risking that suddenly now Nepo will make the counterplay on the f line. So I believe that Hans has to keep the rook on f1, maybe play something like queen g4 and then trying to get inside. But after queen d5, I think Nepo holds everything here And maybe Hans will try to show the purpose of these pawns with h5 and so on. a5. Let's see what happens. Most probably we're gonna have another very simple position. Nepo is not allowing any progress for Niemann on the queen side, despite even he get what he wanted with a3 and b4. Nepo reacts very quickly and directly to stop all potential strategical better moments for Hans. So we are in this segment of area. Tactically speaking, there is not yet any concrete ideas. Strategically speaking, we just explain everything. White cannot move any pawns. For example, c4 or c3 will just ruin the safety of the d3 pawn. On the other side, if Nepo tries to push something like later with d5, then he creates dark square weaknesses, also creates the spot where Hans can put pressure on. We mentioned that these pawns are unpushable. Also, maybe White and Hans can make some little improvement with h3. And that's it. We're gonna have some trades now. Most probably this will arise on the board. Maybe actually Hans will just go directly with queen g4. Provoke Nepo to go with this, and now suddenly, as I mentioned earlier, this is why. This is actually why we need rook closer to the king. He has the line, but Hans also has the line. And after queen d7, there is actually a big threat on this bishop, so queen d5 might be the only move to protect the bishop, protect the pawn. And now maybe after c4, queen e6, Hans can get a pawn. If we end up too far this way, Hans can actually get a pawn here, but this is not totally, let's say, valuable pawn, because we have opposite color bishops. And very soon, this pawn on d3 could become a target after something like bishop g6. So it's not even a big deal taking that pawn, but on the other side, pawn is a pawn, right? But this is the value of having closer rook and closer pieces to the king while the queens are on the board. Once the queens are cleared, then definitely rook on a8 will be much better than the rook on f1, because rook on f1 can do many stuff. Many beginners makes the mistake and still try to attack the king without queens on the board, still try to push the pawns and do some stuff. You can't really do that if you don't have support one of the most strongest pieces, most valuable pieces, such a queen. How do rate their play so far in the match? I believe that Nepo is playing really strong. Really strong. He also won recently Sardinia. I think he also performed very well in another tournament. But I forget where he played also. But Sardinia he won, right? And he decided to play this open. Oh yeah, he also won recently Aeroflot in Russia. So two very strong. I like Aeroflot and Sardinia are one of the strongest open tournaments in the year calendar of chess. So Nepo is really playing strong. He's actually very confident. Yeah, he drops a lot of rating recently, but his game is so good. On the other side, Hans, I think that his game is still good. That's my opinion. But I think he might have some other problem, let's say. Maybe he doesn't feel too much confident as he did recently when he played Grenke or something. Or maybe just Nepo is not his type of player that he prefers to play. So that's why he challenged him. But I don't know. This is just my opinion. It doesn't have to be right. But both of them are playing really good. Also, Nepo mentioned in the post-interview of the last game, not the last game, the second game yesterday, he mentioned that he thought that they played terribly. Then in the interview he said, I did not expect that Engine will agree with all his decisions, because he thought himself that even Hans and even him played poorly. But they did not play that terribly. Eleyah, one question. How you can speak that this much? I don't know. Let's speak for itself. Hans needs to learn how to press on these small advantages. I think he already know it very well. He shows this many times. And he is actually very good and confident in these areas, especially one-on-one matches. You know, sometimes it's just not your day. Sometimes you just don't prefer. Sometimes you're just not that much confident. Maybe you don't have good sleep. Maybe you don't have good rest. You know, there's many factors in chess that decides the game. It's not just the preparation and calculation. You know, if you have a bad day, if you don't feel well, if you don't have good sleep, if you ate something wrong, you know, it can really affect your game. So sometimes when you see the player is struggling to perform well, or has some losing streak, maybe it's not about the game itself. Okay, and we have a5 and g6. What is this? Hans impatiently decided to sacrifice. This is actually huge for the game, because we earlier mentioned that this pawn on g5 is actually the one that controls these dark squares, despite close the bishop, but he decided to sacrifice that pawn. Another thing is how NEPO will react on that. Will he capture that with a bishop or with a pawn? According to computer, computer wants to take with a pawn. According to logic, everyone wants to capture here after g6 with a bishop, of course. But I believe that the reason why is because of this little tactical sequence. After rook takes, there is b takes a5, and he suddenly gets this passer. So it means that he needs to recapture that with a king. But after queen f2 check, king to g8, bishop to b6, and move somewhere the queen, he's also getting this pass pawn for himself. So he's actually challenging NEPO, compensating the g pawn to get the a pawn. That's why he's using this momentum of g6. But the very big problem is that NEPO can just take back with a pawn, and this doesn't affect any king safety. Why? It's even more safer now, because we just mentioned earlier, right? We just mentioned earlier that after having the pawn on g5, NEPO will struggle to have any sort of prophylaxis for the king with h6 and g6 in the future. And by doing g6, I think NEPO will realize very soon that he's more than happy to capture that pawn, and suddenly he has prophylaxis for the king on h7. But the reason why NEPO still thinks and not playing h takes g6, it's because he's afraid of rook to f3 and rook to h3 maneuver. And he's trying to calculate what's happening inside. And what's the problem here actually. And because if he plays bishop to e6, then we'll have the same problem. Rook takes f8, and after king takes f8, we'll have queen h8, and then suddenly the game will be over. After bishop to g8, there is rook to f1. So he needs to recapture back with a rook, and then b takes a5 will guarantee this passer, which will be very, very annoying and gives Hans definitely better game. On the other side, what is then the move here to defend the position? It recommends g5, sacrificing back. And the point is, if you take, let's say, with a queen, now take you on b4, and okay, we just mentioned that this pawn on g5 took a big role in controlling h7 and g7 to stay on the 7th rank, and he gave up the pawn here and here for one h7 pawn. So still there is some pressure, but I believe that this is holdable for black, that this is not that amount of pressure that he needs to be worried about, because after something like, let's say, rook takes and rook takes, if he tries something like rook to g3, he can easily suffer from some move like a rook a1 here. And if bishop c1, then just move the bishop somewhere, like bishop d5 or something. And I believe that black is in the driving seat here. There is not so much things happening on g7. He needs pieces, he needs bishop on this diagonal, but unfortunately bishop is not pinned. So after g6, he decided to go for this concrete thing. also spent a lot of time, 36 minutes for Hans, 41 minutes for NEPO. And there's many things going on here. Someone said that if you want answers from Eleyah, go to Hans on YouTube. He's not reading Twitch chat. I'm reading everything. I just can't read everything at the same time. This commentary is insanely bad. Commentator is lacking knowledge sadly. Matthias Chess. Okay, can you tell me what is wrong here with the explanation? I want to learn something from you, if you can do it better. Don't listen to the haters. I actually like them, so I want to hear them. Someone asked, where is it? I just lost that comment. What is the term of prophylaxis? Prophylaxis, it means playing some useful move that doesn't change too much in the position, like no direct play, and usually slowly improving the position little by little. For example, here we mentioned earlier that after h3, Hans will make prophylaxis and safety for his king, so it's like the quiet move that improves the position for the future. On the other side, NEPO couldn't make this prophylactical move with h6 or g6 because he had this beautiful pawn on g5. Even though this pawn was restricting his own bishop, this pawn was very useful, despite being also double pawn. So this is the term of prophylaxis. And in many scenarios, people are forgetting about that term in chess. I forget it many times in my games. Made so many bad mistakes just because of forgetting this concept, which is very useful on levels above 2200, 2300. To get better in chess, you need to stay patient. That's what prophylaxis term means generally. And we have some things on the board, so that's what we actually recommended for Niemann calculation. Niemann actually saw this is coming very well for him, and after queen to f2, king moves, and then bishop b6 followed by takes on a5. This is actually what we recommend. Queen f2, king g8, bishop b6, queen moves somewhere, and then take on e5. I think NEPO was in a very doubting, so maybe psychologically, practically speaking, g6 was actually a very nice move. When we now take the take back. Because obviously pawn takes was very risky for him. He didn't want to go for this. And it was so dangerous, but machine is machine. Machine says, I can defend this. But humans not. So technically speaking, and practically speaking, maybe g6 is a very strong move. I actually like that move now. Once I see that they entered this line. And now here, after king f8, maybe Hans is thinking for something like, okay, rook a4 is also engine move. What's the purpose of that move? I don't even know myself. I don't know why just he's not autopiloting queen f2. I don't know why he's wasting time here. It's so obvious that queen f2 could come. Maybe queen f2, he didn't like queen f7 simplification or something, but he can avoid it by queen d2 or something. Or you can always come back on h4, I believe so. Yeah. If you were to discuss their style differences, what would you say? I recently learned a lot about NEPO style because I started watching his games because one of the coaches and one of my friends recommended me to watch his games because it's very connected with my style. So it means that NEPO has very attacking dynamic style with white pieces. He likes for very sharp lines, very good theory. And I was watching his games, so I can say that NEPO style is very dynamic and very aggressive. On the other side, Neiman is very solid. And he likes to play for small improvements. That's why we see that he plays Rosalimo. He also played Berlin. So he's more going towards the end game, trying to outplay the opponents in the long game. And we have this. He actually decided to take on a5. Why he just gave up the pawn? Wait. What is the problem? Did he blunder something? Why Hans just gave the pawn? He could get the pawn back with queen f2 and bishop e6. Rook takes a5, queen takes a5. What he thinks here, that he can do something in this position? Doesn't make sense to. Oh, he wants rook a5, rook f1. But okay, king g8. And what then? So Hans is suddenly pawn down. Hans is pawn down. Thanks guys for beautiful comments. Suddenly thousands of you are writing. I cannot read every comment here, so I'm doing my best to read interesting comments. Okay, Hans played queen g4. So makes sense, he wants to get a queen here, and if he plays queen e7 to protect the square, then queen c8 might be a very unpleasant move. Prophylaxis is actually an old medical term in English designed for preventive medicine. That's true, I think so. h4. This is really interesting. h4. Very nice move. Getting pressed on the king side. h6 is coming after that, trying to exploit his weaknesses. Yeah, it's getting intense because we already mentioned earlier that Rook on f1 is doing an amazing job in attacking and helping the queen and bishop to exploit. Is that worth of sacrificing the pawn earlier? We're gonna see it because every single game Hans, for some reason, are little by little sacrificing something. I didn't see that NEPO doing that. NEPO was usually waiting and counterplaying back because Hans was making some risky decisions, as we already know. So this is going to be also an interesting game. At some point it might get even more intense because they're both sooner or later getting under 30 minutes. How do you find your style in chess? I struggle with this. You have to analyze your games with someone who is like expert in this game, and they will help you with that for sure. But if, let's say, if you are already yourself good player, then maybe you can also figure it out yourself. Like, just watch your games, see what's your main weaknesses, see where you're good, how you win the games, how you lose the games. That's very important. Like, when you're analyzing your games or the other games, you're trying to look, how do you win and how do you lose? Do you win more in a solid way? Do you win by checkmate or tactics or something? That's, I think, how you figure out your style. Would you say that Hans is dynamically positional player? Yeah, he also likes dynamics. I've seen many games how he checkmate by tactics or something, but he's not purely aggressive player. He likes very solid play. So that's why he also plays Italian game. With black he played Berlin against NEPO, so he's positionally dynamic. I think you did mention that properly. Eleyah, what's your beard routine? Good question. Just wash it with water, no? You don't need any extra stuff. It will be, I think just natural, no? You don't need any extra things. And I have it already for maybe more than 5 years. So basically it's already based. Queen c8. It's actually maybe the move that Hans missed. He now played alright, guys. So I think that maybe Niemann actually missed some stuff, and he now has very big task of defending this slight worse endgame where he's just clear pawn down, but he has this benefit of opposite color bishops. So all possible outcomes in this endgame could result exactly after the rook trade in a very quick draw. But NEPO will try to definitely press more here. So what will be the strategy now? This is actually quite interesting endgame. I want to see more from this endgame. I don't want to see any quick draw decision, but it also depends how much Hans puts the pressure and doesn't allow NEPO to properly react and, let's say, create a passer. If NEPO create a passer without trading so much pawn, then it could get tricky for Hans. But I believe that Hans is first to get the 7th rank or the 6th rank, so it will be hard for NEPO to generate any big counterplay here. So technically speaking, NEPO is again doing very great job. Very, very great job. He's consistently outplaying Hans in this match until the 4th round. I don't remember one moment where Hans, until this match, until this game 4, hold the advantage, little advantage like NEPO did in most of the games. So we are having still big fight in front of us, because this game could most probably end up in a draw just because of the bishops, opposite color bishops. NEPO is also struggling what to do. It's not easy for him to press here. He can always offer a draw, and just go rest for the tomorrow, but technically he can try, of course. This is not over. For those who just joined us, the current score is in lead by NEPO, 2-1. We are currently playing the 4th game, and tomorrow morning we're going to have the game 5, marking the 50% of already finished games in this tournament. It will be a weekend. I guess many people will be relaxing at homes. No job, no work. So stay tuned and watch the games. And for now, let's go for a little break. I'm going to leave you guys with a screen here, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes. And we are back. So what happened? In meanwhile, as we mentioned, Hans took the 6th rank, while Black played a move bishop to e8. So that makes a lot of sense. He protects the c6 square and wants to get with his rook here and here, while the king will take the defense of the bishop. So even if the rook goes down there on the 8th rank, he'll be fine because king is protecting that bishop. On the other side, Nepo can take proper control over the 2nd rank, while this bishop cannot really defend the c2 pawn. What happened in meanwhile, guys? Was there any action? What was gone? Nothing much. Let's see what could possibly happen in this position. So theoretically now, maybe Hans can try something like d4, and if NEPO would capture that pawn, he might create some counterplay along the 7th rank and definitely increase the tension on the king side now, which is technically one of very nice ideas, but NEPO doesn't need to capture that guy, he can ignore that. What is this move e4? Is this really creating any problems in the future? Don't believe so, because maybe there is even d5 move, exploiting these dark squares so that d6 can get in the action, the rook on b6. So this is one idea. Second idea is just to ignore it. Let's say to play the check, then king f2 and rook to a2, simply dominating, and then maybe even taking this pawn down with check. So this is not comfortable for Hans. So bishop e8 is quite testing move. Rook b7 could be played, but then how Hans will defend after check? King f2, then he might lose the pawn. If king h2 and rook a2, then definitely Hans has to seek for the counterplay. Will we get the position where Hans will lose another pawn? It's questionable. But I believe that he has a counterplay here, despite even taking the pawn on c2. After d takes and rook e7, there is the pawn back, but this pawn could get very soon on the 4th and 3rd rank. So let's say bishop f7, rook takes e5, and just somehow to maintain the pressure on the g2 pawn. I guess rook g5 is the only move, and then he wants to do it the same way back. But they will play g6. I mean, NEPO will play g6, and he'll protect the g line from that pressure. Like g6 immediately, potentially. And it's maybe h5, king f7, takes. Yeah. So this endgame is actually, and technically, more pleasant for black. Bishop e8, Hans is in potential trouble also with time. I don't know what's his time control. Suddenly we have again frozen time. Maybe I have to refresh the screen. He's 21 minutes. And NEPO is 30 minutes. Rook b2. Hans dropped the rook back because he wanted to properly defend the c2 pawn. He was not a fan of giving that pawn away because maybe he did not see the possibility of d4 break. He did not like rook a2 coming and capturing that pawn, so he's technically avoiding these problems. But on the other side, what if he just brings the king all the way to a6? Or maybe he can start with something like rook a1 to see where the king goes. Yeah, it's technically interesting because if he leaves the g7 pawn with a king on e6, then rook b7 will be a very uncomfortable idea. But then maybe bishop to d7 and close that line. Now NEPO is pushing again. NEPO is definitely getting some quite nice practical advantage in this endgame. What did you do on your break? I was asking for coffee, and that's pretty much it. Take some little snack and that's it. Has Hans had a better position in any of the games? Seems he's fighting for a draw each game. Yeah, he had some hard time in these games. He got some chances, but they just for moments. NEPO was the one that was consistently keeping always some little edge, but Hans successfully managed to draw the second and the third game, while the first one, it didn't went well for him. NEPO is always confident, and that's why he's always strong. Tell me please where I study openings. What is your elo? Firstly, I want to ask you that question. Can I guess your elo? 1300? Rook b7. So he finally activating the rook again on the 7th rank. The score for the people who are always asking is in lead for NEPO. This is the 4th game. Tomorrow we have game 5 and game 6. The same time, 10 in the morning Central European time, and the afternoon game at 2:30. NEPO is leading the game, and he has a very great chances to make this 3-1 for NEPO. What is your best place on Title Tuesday? I don't remember the place, but I remember that I scored 7.5 out of 11. And on one Thursday, I scored 8 out of 11 recently. But that was the one that was like 3 in the morning for us Europeans, so it was only like maybe not so much players played that one, like usually they play during the day. But it was still a very nice score. I was maybe like at some point 5th. I remember I screenshot that one. So Hans is definitely searching for initiative. Rook b7, taking control over the 7th rank. NEPO is hanging around. He likes to walk, obviously. From where does he read chat? I'm reading chat everywhere. Twitch, YouTube, you can write anything. And let's type 1 for Hans, 2 for NEPO. Let's see who has more fans here. Hans or NEPO? 1 for Hans, 2 for NEPO. Good morning from Florida. Is this game 3? No, this game 4. What's the reason for b7 rook? He wants to just take control. He's ready for d4 breaks. And he's definitely challenging. Oh, guys, I think now we might have very nice idea for Hans here. Actually, rook b7 is not actually to control the g7 pawn. G7 pawn is very well protected. Now just figure out that there is another idea about that move. And that's the idea of bishop a7 followed by bishop b8. And that could only be possible if the rook is staying on the 7th rank, because it's protecting, obviously, that square from that spot. And after bishop a7, let's say rook takes e2, bishop b8, very huge and very nice counterplay from Niemann. This is a very nice idea, by the way. I think if Hans spotted that this is a very great chance to generate nice counterplay. So he played rook a2, and now Hans is about to make a move. Also, there is bishop g5 with idea of bishop e7. But technically, I believe that there is one difference behind this. Rook takes e2, bishop e7, king f7, bishop takes e6, and king e6. What is the difference between bishop a7 and bishop g5? It's a huge difference. It's not easy to figure out, but now when I showed, maybe you already understood. So the point why would bishop a7 will be better, it's because it's keeping the king on the 8th rank and directly taking the pawn on a6. So bishop g5, rook c2 happen, and bishop e7, they're actually going for this. But Hans did not, maybe he doesn't have time enough, or he just blitz out everything, that bishop a7, bishop b8 will restrict still the king. Now king has the action and coming to a6. While bishop a7, rook c2, bishop b8, and any move here for NEPO will result into the bishop takes d6, while the king remains on the 8th rank, which means restriction. For the endgame, that's actually very valuable to know that you want to keep your opponent's king as much as you can on his 8th rank. So that's practically the point of this maneuver, but he actually decides to go for bishop g5, which is more obvious and more human, obviously. And after bishop d6, king will get activated. And to be honest with you, this is now getting more shaky, because suddenly black's king is getting centralized and getting in the center. And look at the white's king on g1, it's completely out of the game. But there is benefits for Niemann that his bishop and his rook are doing amazing active job, while the bishop on e8 is completely out of the game. But I believe that NEPO will very soon, sooner or later, he will look to activate his bishop on g6 or h5, or let's say f7 to d5, but let's say bishop d6, king to e6. There's also bishop takes e5 here. Maybe that's actually what Hans is trying to opting for, but I'm not entirely sure. After king d4, rook takes e8, and king takes d3. What is the chances for Hans to enter this position? Will he look for that? So we got this on the board. Bishop d6, king to e6 happened. And now bishop takes e5 or bishop f8. Another very base endgame. Eleyah, what is your favorite opening? My favorite opening is Kalashnikov, Sicilian. I really like that one. And also King's Indian is another one. Bishop a7 is almost unplayable. But okay, if that move crosses his mind, then most probably would be fine move to happen, because like it's literally forcing. Otherwise, NEPO will just lose the d6 pawn and e5 pawn, everything with check check. You know, it will be terrible for NEPO to face that. I think bishop a7. If I think Hans had time, he could think like he could anyway get the position, but with the king on 8th rank. Now when king is on e6 is very preferably for NEPO. So actually Hans wants to win this, and sorry, maybe he doesn't want to win, but he acknowledged that bishop takes e5 might be too risky to enter this rook endgame, so he's choosing to go for bishop f8, keeping the bishops on the board. Maybe the best idea. And he wants to take this pawn. He also wants to go rook e7. NEPO quickly playing the move bishop g6, escaping this easy fork pattern. So no blunders. What do you think of Belgrade Gambit? I cannot remember how that goes. Is it coming from e4, e5 or something? But I think it's quite nice. I think it's quite nice. Do you know the Riesler? I don't know who is that. Check. So he gave one check on e7, trying to see where the king goes. Is this the city where the Fischer and Spassky played in US banned him? And US banned him? This is the city where, yeah, they had a match, but I think the first half. The other half was, I think, held in a different country. When is Novak Djokovic playing? I think Novak Djokovic lost the match today, unfortunately. Some people again asking for the score. Currently NEPO is leading 2-1. This is the 4th game. The next game is coming tomorrow morning, Europe, Central Time, 10 a.m. While the other game is 2:30. Eleyah, how you like your coffee? It's actually decent. King f6. Hans played king f6. Another problem is you can't take this pawn, for beginner speaking. You can't really take this pawn here because you're gonna just drop your rook. On the other side, if you take this guy with a rook here, then Hans played rook d7, but if you take this guy with a rook, then suddenly you're losing this important pawn here, and then this is actually a very tough position for Hans to defend. That's why he played move rook to d7, because he wanna protect his pawn on d3, and he also wanna take this guy with a check by putting another pressure on the e5 pawn. So Hans is not doing great activity in draw with these two pieces, but I believe that at some point he wants to activate his king, possibly on e3 square, but as long as the rook is controlling the second rank, that's almost impossible. On the other side, some patterns of perpetual checks or even potential checkmates could appear if he controls enough the king side with his pawns and try to restrict this king only on the f6 square so he can take the action and put some additional pressure. Maybe also potentially trapping this bishop. But this is very risky to play because king is cut off then on the first rank, and that's actually why he would like to have the king on e3. The same situation could happen for the king on f6 if Hans picked that bishop a7 move earlier, like bishop a7, rook takes it to here, and now let's say rook to e2, takes with check, king g8. We're gonna get the same position, but king is on the 8th rank, which is massive difference. Now here, king is on the 6th rank, which is always better to the endgames. People who never studied or are very new to the concept ideology for the endgames, is very important to bring your king to the center, because king helps the other minor pieces and the rooks to slowly push your pawns. Live board is the pixel at the bottom right. Yeah, that's the live board. Rook to d2, king to e6, Good suggestion. Let's see what happens after that. I think that's also possible. I believe that after king e6 they can repeat, no? Rook e7, and now going on d5 and go for just a similar check, and if he goes back then we just have repetition. So that's why king f6, something like king e6 will literally go for the threefold repetition if Nepo wants to make a draw, but obviously Nepo is pushing for the win here. So he plays rook to d2. He's putting the pressure on this pawn. Now, for example, taking here with check king e6 is possible, and then this pawn might fall down. There is no way how Hans can actually go after this pawn, because even if rook d8 happens, this bishop is controlling that square. By the way, rook takes d3, and this simplicity definitely leads to Jarvish endgame. Some just king f2, king e3, and then simply controlling these guys here would be enough to maybe hold the game here. Maybe it's not so much simple, but this endgame is potentially possible to draw. Like just put a king on d2 square and then deviate with bishops. Here and there depends where the king goes. If the king goes on this side, then just put a bishop here and control the e3 square, or just have your bishop on d4 if the pawns end up on e4 and c4. That's why no rook trade will happen in this game, so he might take this guy with a bishop, but that's allowing some self-pinning, which is not great usually. He might protect himself later with e4 and try to extend this pawn here, but more likely Hans will hold this position. I don't have information. Was the Norway chess the one that's playing also today? $15 for Hans, 25 minutes for Nepo. And we broke 1,000 viewers on YouTube. Welcome, guys. Enjoy pretty much the last moments of the game 4 in match Hans Niemann versus Jan Nepomniachtchi. Nepo is leading 2-1 against Hans. We can see the scoreboard here. There is 4 games to go. And this is actually quite important game for Hans. He needs to keep and maintaining defense here, stability, so he can push in the next games properly. If he loses this one, this will be really tough to come back in the match. He want to win this match. David Howell needs better help in Norway chess. D4 then E4. No, I don't need to take you. I can pass. And then how about this? It's not easy, right? Does India perform any super tournament with super GMs? Yes. There is many tournaments in India, but nobody's playing them. Guys, don't worry, NEPO always have the escort couple of fair play arbiters, so don't put strange comments. So we have king e6. Bishop g7, king e6, that's on the live board. And Hans again with 13 minutes against 25. Why did NEPO say in an interview yesterday that his friend told him to move? His friend told him to move after the game because they were speaking after the game, guys. There was some sequence that he missed, but it was not so obvious for the time scramble. I already asked you about the openings that you ask. What is your elo? I need to know your elo because maybe the openings are not a problem. I don't think that players should be walking away from the board during the game. You have to sit for 5 hours straight. No, that's impossible. I disagree with that. You need some rest. And you need to take out of the board. You are 1900 and definitely you don't have problems with the openings. Better to look for calculation and endgames. Did you see the Laos cave rescue? 5 people saved from a very small cave. I did not hear about that, but thanks God they saved them. That's great to hear. Eleyah, give us percentage of win, draw, or loss of Hans right now. Okay, I think winning this for Hans is like the margin is close to 0%. We can keep it like, let's say 1% of winning scenario here. Only if NEPO blunder, that's this 1%. Drawing chances are actually very huge, like let's say 85%, and the rest 14%, I would say that NEPO could win this game. What is my predictions for the World Championship match? I think it will be very exciting. Sindarov is a new bright star in the chess and very strong player. Very nice clashes of styles. We'll see Sindarov likes to attack. He likes very dynamic games. He plays King's Indian. He plays sharp openings. On the other side, he can play also solid, but Gukic is concretely like a technician, so he doesn't mind playing something dynamic also, but it's definitely clash of styles, so that will be a very good match. I think many people will watch it. Do you think an 1800 player FIDE would hold this with white? Easily or difficult? Depends who he plays. If he plays NEPO, no. If he plays someone around his level, then it could be possible, because the other side can also make mistakes. Do you think he will become GM one day? No. Sadly, but no. So much sacrifices. I can become IAM, that for sure. Just need to put more on work. Alright, Hans entering definitely big time scramble. We can put them a little bit on the main screen. Footage is very crispy. We're gonna just keep them for a moment. He's in a locked in mode, but I believe this is getting more tricky for him. And he played a move. He played rook to d8. He's aware of troubles. But this is definitely becoming suspicious how Hans will handle this situation. And I'm afraid that we might have the NEPO here in the studio after the game. How to draw this? It's very hard, practically speaking. Like, we can discuss by seeing the engine lines here and some practical knowledge of mine here. But maybe this e4 was not necessary that directly. Maybe NEPO missed this move bishop h6. Like, this is something we mentioned earlier, that if you would play here the move d4, then e3 is already winning position for NEPO. How are you going to stop this pawn getting promoted? Rook cannot use the e line to get behind the pawn. On the other side, now after bishop h6, which is played in the game, Hans played it quite convincingly. And then we already have some king f2, rook d1 on the board, g4. Many things happens very quickly. Was this the forcing lines here? So 2 pass pawns for NEPO. This is definitely not getting... This is definitely getting out of control. Hans finding all moves properly to save the game. I can say that if he loses one moment of focus here, these pawns can become easily threat of promotion for the queen. This is becoming very, very intense. But on the other side, there is no clear direction how black can improve the position. Maybe he can just push the c pawn, but Hans will try to push the h pawn and then king to e3, I guess. So let's say if Nepo plays here to move c5, is that possible? And what, h5 isn't that bad that much? How about bishop e4, maybe king e3, maybe bishop f7 actually, just in case to support a pawn for the future. But it's quite a strange move to make because you are just behind the king. Bishop to e4 is more natural, but it allows king to e3 or maybe, yeah, king e3, I'm not sure. Maybe king e3 is wrong. There is some rook e1 according to computer. Rook e1 and king has to go on f4. If king goes on d2, there is rook e2. And then king is suddenly going away, too much away. Yeah, he's driving the king and now it's almost in a very dangerous zone. He needs to go on a4, otherwise here will be a checkmate. And now just d2 and that's game over. So after g4, Nepo starts thinking what to do with his position. Definitely Hans wants to push h5 and he wants to bring his king closer. Maybe he wants also to get bishop on e3, so he controls this, and it's really hard for Nepo to create any sort of improvement here. But I completely agree. This looks extremely easy to mess up. 7 minutes on board. We had to refresh the screen to get the clock running. So yeah, technically good chances for Nepo now, just because of the time scramble. Is this a different playing hole from yesterday? Yes, correct. But tomorrow we are coming back to the same playing hole. Nepo knows his draw, he looks frustrated. Maybe actually Nepo thinks that this position cannot be won. how hard it is to have focus for 5 hours. It's actually very hard because you cannot perform with calculation well as you can perform in the first hour of playing. So it's actually very hard. That's why they are trying this new format, 60 minutes plus 30 seconds. Is king a5 bad move here? Not sure, but he pushes c5. He's making the progress. He's creating the progress here. If this pawn reaches c4 and then c3, the game could be very, very much over, guys. So it's getting highly intense here, like bishop to e3, c4. And now the only move for Niemann is rook to c8. That's the only move. Otherwise, if he tries anything else, like let's say h5, it's already getting in favor for NEPO. Bishop to e4, let's say. Oh, there is this perpetual. Okay, wait. So bishop f7, that's better move to keep control over that pawn here. But bishop d4 is so hard to make, like so hard to think that you have to block the d line. Like this guy is not getting in a good control for Niemann. If he burns more time here, he might get in a very big trouble. He's also 6 minutes here. And he actually played the move bishop e3. I believe that NEPO will go for the move c4. And maybe Hans will play the move rook c8. But this is not easy to defend, guys. Engine can defend everything, obviously, but it's not easy. But I like how Hans plays quite quickly. He plays quickly just to not get burned. If he's obvious and he's confident about some move in the game, then he'll play it, what he's doing. So he knows the defense here, I guess. Rook c8 is very natural. He should find it. I agree completely on that. Let's go. 1 for Hans, 2 for NEPO. Let's see the fans in chat. Who has more fans? NEPO or Hans? Oh. That was a nice line. I think that NEPO will not give him easy draw here. He will not accept it that early because he has a great chances. Where's this played? This played in Belgrade, Serbia. In Hyatt Residency, where here was the match, half of the match of Boris Spassky and Robert James Fisher. Current score is 2 for Jan, 1 for for Hans. Game 4, tomorrow morning we have 10 a.m. Central Europe time, another game. 4 in the morning New York time, I believe around 2 p.m. in India. Yeah, in this position, I think Nepo will go for c4 and then rook c8. Not sure if Nepo will try something like d2. This will result into king a2 only move, rook to h1, king takes d2, I would say, or maybe bishop takes is better. And then, can he take here? No, there is this, okay. So, maybe first with this. But this is not easy because, like, if he pushes d2, this is actually... Can he just play rook h1 directly? Isn't that bad? Just keep the tension on the board. Why he needs to play d2? There is no need for that. Let's say h5, bishop b4, rook takes c4. Oh, because the pawn is saying okay. But can he create some compensation here now by sacrificing that pawn? Yeah, I think Nepo sees that he might lose one of his pawns. That's why he is spending some time here trying to create something, obviously. And Hans will try to maintain the defense. Nepo getting on the 15 minutes, while Hans is on 7:44. And Nepo push c4. Now the only move for Hans is rook to c8, and he autopilot the move rook c8. So confident. That's what we like. What's wrong with rook g1 there? d2, king here, rook g1. Bishop takes g1, my friend, and now you can resign. Because you cannot promote a pawn. Bishop will take you. So that's game over. But it's nice guess. If you would take this pawn, then it would be nice. But unfortunately, rook c8 is there. The clocks are stopped because once I made analysis, or maybe I should just click on live, or once I made analysis on analysis board, some moves, then it's immediately stopping the clock. I don't know for what reason, but yeah, if I refresh the page, then it works. I think that's actually for any website, not just the Endgame AI, like also for Lichess, for chess.com, and so on. More than 1,000 people and 1,100 people are coming in the stream. We are just getting more and more here. Who won game 3? It was a draw. Nepo in a trouble to create some tension. Hans is confidently holding this. If he managed to take down this pawn on c4, which he might do, because king to d5 doesn't work, guys, because there's rook c5, and then he can even go for repetition. He can also take the pawn and he'll be fine with that. So that's why here Nepo is spending some time, because he's trying to get at least one useful pawn on the king side. So great job by Hans, perfectly holding the position. King d4, if you meant king d5, we just explained that king d5, there's rook c5. Current score is 2 for Nepo, 1 for Hans. Is this a challenge or a tournament? This is the match. The exhibition match. But it's rated, of course, with a new format of 60 plus 30. Nepo visually frustrated, pushing the move d2. And Hans has to play the move king to e2. So we got this on the board. And now Nepo goes for, I believe, rook to h1, what I see from the screen. Yeah, he made that move. Obviously Hans will take on d2, but depends now with what piece what he want to take. Is it with bishop or with a king? And Nepo stood to take some snag behind, because he would maybe need it for the future moments. It's getting quite packed here. Hans for taking that pawn with a king. And at this point, maybe Nepo will just protect the pawn on c4, bishop to d3. Or what he played, rook takes h4. Guys, will we see the draw here? The handshake? Or he's trying to invite Hans to take on h4 and then push h5, trying to get the pawn on g4 potential passer. So he gives the check first, deciding where the king will go. Wanna push the king behind if it's possible. Nepo plays king to d5, rook c5 check. Nepo goes back, and I think this might be the handshake, guys. Threefold repetition. He goes up. And that's a draw. We have a draw on the board, guys. Perfect timing. GG. Very great defense by Hans with this crispy footage. And the match is over. So we have another draw. 2.5 for Nepo and 1.5 for Hans. Quite exciting match. Quite tight. We are going to try to bring some of them in the studio. Stay tuned, don't leave us.
I'm pretty sure this is more. Maybe I should put that first. Just taking just back. Is that instead of one, is it queen two? I mean, it should be 7 take on 2 5. It's slightly better. Then like bishop b7, so bishop 2 5, bishop 2 5, bishop b7, or bishop b8. Yeah, I remember. I think it looks interesting.
See you tomorrow. Don't forget John. Okay.
Well, the fit is bracelet.
Like it works? Okay. I can use this. Yeah, such a bad opening. I mean, I knew this. I did everything. Wow, I just take. I mean, I'm just. You know, I believe him. Like, I mean,
You believe this is good for him?
yeah. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I shouldn't be afraid. I mean,
Did
I
you
mean,
make it?
I didn't even honestly. I didn't even consider it. It's just. Yeah, I have to be a bit more ambitious. I mean, here, you know, I just.
Was it like nostalgia from the second game?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a great opening. I mean, here. Yeah, why? I don't need to rush. I mean, I should be slightly better. I mean, at least, but to be like to. Yeah, what is this? Queen d2. Wow. Yeah, I didn't see that. I mean, yeah, rook f1. Wow. I'm capable of finding that, but yeah, this was just, you know, I blundered.
Yeah, just the pawn
didn't-
down.
I know, but I didn't realize that he
Oh, you thought this?
I just didn't realize like that. This was, I mean, it was such a elementary blunder. But I think I held my.
That was actually a good defense, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I defended.
By the way, there is one thing that you could try instead of going bishop g5, and bishop a7 and bishop b8 to keep his king on a8. Right?
Yeah, I actually, you know,
You see this?
I saw bishop a7 with a rook on 8, but yeah, here, wow. Well, that's
just
super
much
strong,
better, yeah.
Wow. Oh, and the game just ends immediately. Yeah, I mean, this was so. I mean, this wasn't easy. I mean, from afar, I just thought, like, I mean, if I'm losing here, I mean, there's not much I can do. But the most important thing was this concretely. I mean, he has
Rook
no,
c8,
yeah,
yeah.
this was. I mean, I had seen it. But yeah, I mean, you know, NEPO was a bit of a hard player to play against because I mean, I knew f5 was bad.
Was knight c3 some idea to make him out of prep?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not that easy. I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, again, the same thing, you know, terrible structure. Like this, I can understand. I mean, it's good for me. That's not rocket science. But after h5, yeah, queen h6 castles. I mean, how do you evaluate
Maybe just to
this?
fix the knights on the light square somehow, like knight d2.
Yeah, knight g5. Queen b6 is not an easy move. Like this, I mean, I should have considered, but I mean, I also played, you know, way too quickly. Knight g5. I mean, I have so much time. You know, I completely didn't realize that, like that he can just block and castle. It's funny. It's the exact same motif
Yeah.
in both games.
King
but-
is7, king g8, and here castles.
I mean, I should just be patient. Like, for example, he can't really go. I mean, like, I'm playing, right? I mean, I can never lose such position. But yeah, very, very poor. I mean, there's no reason.
Yeah, obviously this a3 b4 plan to break the queen.
Yeah, I mean, that's the clear plan. I'm not really risking anything, but yeah. I mean, after knight g5, queen b6 is such a tough move. And if here, I mean, h6 knight h. I mean, you kind of, I mean, the king is just, it's like something like this. Yeah, I just have to be, I mean, it's the principled way to play, but yeah, I mean, preparation went
Yeah,
well.
bishop pair. Technically,
Maybe
it's
92
always
is-
better.
Maybe 92 is the move. Maybe I.
Knight e2 f4.
This is also fine.
Did you expect him to play the same line with e6?
You know, because I mean I defended very well with black in this previous game.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that was the main thing I was expecting and checking. But yeah, it's so in these positions, you know, you look at it, you prepare it, and then you kind of get to the game, and then you still struggle because obviously, like against most players, I would look at this and just think, oh, I mean, it's stupid. And why am I not just? I mean, this is primitive kind of stuff. I mean, if you can't like show some bravery, but yeah, I mean, you can see that's really the only. I mean, c3 d4. Yeah, I mean, like for example, let's say I go like take and c3 for example. Is this already bad? h5 only move. I mean,
Yeah, we saw that, but
I mean,
maybe
yeah,
don't like it.
even just c3 d4, like this is just
Literally like the
yeah,
same.
h5 I think is, I mean, something like this, d5. I mean, it's strategically very complicated. I mean, but he's definitely under pressure. Yeah, at least I kept my nerves. I mean, and it's weird. I mean, both white games I'm like defending for my life, which is quite unusual. Usually I put a lot of pressure with white, but he has a bit of bluffing. He can bluff in the opening sometimes. I mean, this is a total bluff, and I should have.
But he didn't play it fast. He thought actually a lot.
I mean, this move he played quickly.
Oh, he knight 6 played
Yes,
quickly.
I mean, it's yeah, maybe I overestimated. But yeah, you know, it's funny that now that I look at it, I didn't even think about the contrast with 2 knights and 2 bishops. But yeah, I should have learned my lesson.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, honestly, it looked easy. But I mean, this was not like from afar when you have no time to see that this position. I mean, it looks super scary with the 2
Yeah,
pawns,
this
but
is.
I thought that I should have some checks. It was a super concrete solution because, I mean, for example, I could have played like this, but then if I'm not really concretely, then I have to just. I mean,
Yeah,
it
then.
could go wrong super easily. So I felt like either here he has a forced win, and I thought the only way that he could have a forced win is playing c5.
Yeah.
And bishop e4. Yeah, I thought, yeah, king e4. And then king d4, yeah. That's strong. So, I mean, I thought, like, also, if he plays here, h5. And then the same concept. But yeah, I mean, it's fortunate. It's also fortunate that I have this check as well.
Yeah, that's saving. Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
But I mean, I didn't do anything like that wrong. I mean, I blundered a pawn in a position where should have margin. But honestly, if I find queen d2, this is a tough position. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, with a pawn, it's not easy to play. I mean, you already see at h5, like for example, king g8, queen g4, queen d5, a6. I mean, it's all
differences with that.
Yeah, it's not easy. So, you know what? I just a very elementary blunder, but unfortunately.
Okay, great. How's your time here in Belgrade? Do you like it so far?
Yeah, I mean, I really like Belgrade as a city. I didn't realize the Minister of Sport was gonna visit the match. I mean, that's very cool. I've never played tournaments in America where the Minister of Sport attended, so I've spent a lot of time in Belgrade. I mean, as playing chess outside the chessboard, so it's like usually a lucky city for me. So hopefully things will turn around and I can continue to have good memories.
Great. There's still more 4 games to go, and thanks for joining the stream. There is more than 1,000 people on the stream watching you guys. So thanks for bringing this enjoyment for us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good luck. Alright guys, that's it. We managed to bring the HANS even after this game. Mission accomplished. Great. First snap on our HANS. Tomorrow we're gonna try to bring them both, if that's possible. And that's it. We analyze together the game. Tomorrow 10 AM Central Europe time. I hope you're gonna join the stream and be patient to analyze together and watch the games. Thanks for joining us.